turn on the recording. All right, good. So good evening to all of you. Actually, I moved this a little too soon. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to take you through a couple things to sort of remind you what's going on and to link this back into the leadership concept. And then I'm going to share with you, I think I said this before, just a quick overview of a prototype of a curriculum design that I utilized when we were working with that one school I told you about who had the walls knocked out between their classrooms, just to give you a sense of, yeah, as you utilize these concepts of design thinking, you're able to really begin to put this to work within your own environments at different levels. So something I want to take a look at, and then we'll talk about your projects in case you have any concepts. So I'm pretty sure all of you are in the first two panels of the Delbert there, and not too many are in team 3. I always get a kick out of how Delbert can, lay into things about the craziness of ideas. So if you ever go out to his website and you can type things in like school or creativity or professional development, he's got tons of these. So I think they many times are apropos. So what I want to do is to think about this, and what you're seeing here are some of the pictures from the Friday night in Philadelphia, where people were doing the prototyping, the hands-on one. And those who are in the virtual world, you can at least see what they were doing related to their development of their prototypes using materials that allow them to think with their hands. So that's the one thing that the online environment misses quite a bit. So what we're going to look at is again, this idea that I want you to keep in mind, that I think this is very, very important in this course, is this idea again of the relationship of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And again, when you're reading Puccio and tying it into your different personas, and then looking at what Daniel Pink talks about as it relates to motivation, these two things I think are extremely important for you, and to understand how to use them and when to use them. That I think is the most important thing. And as I said to you, most of you, if not all of you, are working in convergent organizations. That's the way they're structured. That's the way they work things through. But particularly in the K-12 environment, and also at the college level, you're now beginning to see this emergence of divergent thinking, and it's actualized through the development of maker spaces, particularly that are springing up within school districts and in universities, et cetera. So even at Drexel, it has an entire area that is centered on innovation and design. And it's part of the strategic plan of the university is to do a lot of cross-disciplinary activities around the development of entrepreneurship, and also the ability to create things, to generate many types of ideas. So this idea of convergent and divergent thinking is becoming much more powerful at all levels within organizations, and also within the corporate environments also. So again, I want you to think about that. And so as we look at these different areas here, again, going back to the iceberg, that as you think about your project, what the project is about, what you're working on in relationship to the project, again, if you look at the mental models, as your team looks at those, and I know when I was in the Philadelphia group and also those of you online, you're looking at, okay, what are the assumptions? What are the metaphors that are driving this particular model that you're building out? So the question that you're constantly asking is, what thinking is in place that creates these types of structures? So we're working basically from the bottom of the iceberg upwards as you're doing your prototyping. Whereas again, if you remember, it's a good way that if you're trying to understand current reality, you work from the top down. If you're trying to work towards innovation, creativity, and change, you work from the bottom up. So then once you begin to understand the assumptions and the beliefs that are driving the system, then your next question you're really asking is, what systems are causing these actions? And so, what are the things that are affecting people in their daily routines and activities? And in the school environment, whether it be K-12 or, a university environment, curriculum, schedule, contracts are very important. Policies are very important. So again, think about what you're designing from what the team is looking at in relationship to the assumptions or the metaphors you're using, how they shape then the systemic structures, and then what are you going to see over time? What type of behavior are you going to see since you're designing learning spaces? And if you're using a learning space that is intergenerational, what are you seeing in adults over time? What are you seeing in young people over time? What do you see in terms of the role of the teacher? Again, this framework becomes extremely important. And then finally, what you're really doing there is, okay, what's there? I mean, what's happening because of that interaction between the mental models, the systemic structure, and the type of data that supports what your challenge is all about. So again, any comments or questions about this? Either from the point of view of implementing it in your own leadership style, or what you're doing within your projects right now.
I was getting motion sickness.
So we'll take silence as an understanding, or okay, let's go to the next slide. So again, now, yeah, go ahead. Is someone going to say? I'm hearing noise.
If I do, I kind of want to do mine in every position.
Okay, so I think someone's got their mic on. We can hear your conversation. So again, then on top of this concept, as we're looking at this, again, putting the theory U concepts are, these are the tools that get people to begin to get down to the level of presencing, of basically, the idea that we talked about, letting go to let come. So when you think about the project as you're developing it and as you receive feedback on it, then what you're now working on is really taking the prototype idea and then beginning to institutionalize it from the point of view of building out. So again, the tools of Theory U are really there to help you to get to the types of levels of discussion that are there. They're very critical. They're the ones, and hopefully you were able to watch part of that video that I gave you of Sharma running the prototyping boot camp that he put together up at MIT, just to give you a sense of what that's about and what people around the world are doing. So again, if you're going to turn something new, into this, then you got to let go of something old. And again, these tools are there, and I'm hoping as you journal this and and you write reflectively about this, you're beginning to see the interconnection of these, and as you work through in terms of your teams. So let me ask this again. Any comments or questions or clarifications that or insights that you have in relationship to the two slides that I've just shown you? Okay, so moving right along. So again, as you begin to play around with the assumptions, these are the things that if you're going to try to get people to change within your organization, within your school, or actually, if you're a classroom teacher, the same thing. How do you get kids to begin to rethink what they're doing within your classroom? So again, what you're beginning to look at is this idea of creating new patterns of relationships, among people or between people. You're looking at different types of structures. So if you're a classroom teacher and you're trying to create some type of differences in terms of the learning within that, then you begin to look at maybe the way in which you organize the structure within the room, the physical space, the way in which you organize desks, the way in which you schedule out, the way in which different people interact with each other, whether they stay in stationary groups or they have moving groups. Again, organizational structure says a lot, because if you remember, I said to you, one of the most important things you need to take away from all these courses is the simple statement that structure shapes the behavior of people over time. And so when you begin to look at this in terms of yourselves, then how do you begin to rethink your teaching and learning? So if maker spaces are becoming a major component within your district, and you're creating these spaces within the schools, how does that begin to change you as an individual in terms of teaching? But more importantly, what does it do to the learning process for kids, first of all, and then for you as professionals within that environment? And then the next question, and this is the bugaboo question, is what type of forms of assessment do we need to develop, given the fact that you have external pressures from states mandating certain types of assessments, which many times goes against a lot of the things that we're talking about. And then really, then the other thing that you need to look at is students and teachers engage in fewer separate classes per day. That becomes the important component of this, that the more you utilize technology within a learning environment, because what technology does is it changes the flow of information, how information comes in. And then if you're still looking at the way in which we use grade levelness or we use disciplines, the question then is how do we get kids to begin to see the interconnectedness between those disciplines? And one of the ways from a structural point of view is that you really need to look at more integrated classes, whether it be science or the arts, mathematics, or language. How do you begin to combine those in a way that kids can utilize them in all the different disciplines, which then raises the question of how do you begin to restructure time, within a school? And so professional learning then for you as professionals within either K-12, university level, or within a business in relationship to being able to adapt to changing market forces, then how do we continually have our professional learning taking place? So that becomes important. And then finally, as I said to you, the concept of time has to be totally rethought. So with these concepts that I've thrown out there, how do they interact with your own thinking or what you're doing within your teams, or generally within your own routines of work every single day. So any thoughts or comments about that or impressions?
I have a comment, Dr. Gould.
Yes.
I tried something last year in our department that was different. It was new. I flipped all the science classrooms. And what I found is that the professional learning that's out there for teachers doesn't keep up with people when they're changing the mental models. So how do we do that? Even with our projects, how do we plan for something that is coming straight out of our head? Something that's brand new.
Yeah, okay. Well, the question is let me ask this. How did it come out of your head? It might sound bizarre, but, seriously, how did it come out of your head?
It was one of those things where you're watching the kids. All right, so for me, I teach in a school that's 90% Hispanic.
Okay.
And if you know anything about Hispanic culture, which I've learned just from being there, is that they work better in community. So, we sat down and said, well, if they work better in community, then let's teach them in community. And that's where we decided to flip the classrooms.
Okay.
But then when we turn it around and we're trying to provide professional learning opportunities to train other teachers to do what we're still trying to learn how to do well. I mean, we're doing it. Are we doing it at 100%? No, but nobody is 100% ever. We're learning as we go. There's not really a lot out there for us.
But let me ask you this. So those of you who started this process and have flipped it and are working in community, where did you get your knowledge base to be able to do this?
Partially just from being in the school for a long time.
Okay.
Just from just from being a part, injecting ourselves into the community.
Right.
And observation, and there's research out there about blended learning and flipping classrooms, not towards certain cultures, but we applied it
Okay.
to our students, and we said, well, this might work.
And what are you finding out about your students right now?
Oh my God, they're excelling beyond belief.
Yeah. Okay. So the question then is, what you're asking me is then, okay, how do you begin to continually learn to make this work, or how do you get other people to get involved in it? Right?
Well, I looked at the where it says professional learning is continuous, and I can say I learn from what I do every day, but as a teacher, and I mean, this from being in a school and being an administrator in a school, we're constantly subjected to PD and having to go through kind of professional learning situations, and if it's not applicable, where do you get those professional learning instances?
Well, let me ask the question is again, and if I were your superintendent, I'd be doing this with you. Say, look, I'm going to give you a lot of information about this because obviously you're showing me data that says that this is working with kids. So for example, when you were in 800, did you get Sengi's book, Schools That Learn?
I did.
Okay. So if you go through that book, there's quite a bit on there on how to create learning communities. How to structure those. There's a lot of activities in there that allow you to do that. But as you do that, the question then is, so let's think about Theory U. Theory U is to create generative conversation with people, correct?
Yes.
So you guys have something happening there, and you're getting some data that supports it. And what I'm hearing you say is, I would like to get other people to do this, correct?
Correct.
So, all right. So you talk to the principal, you talk to the superintendent, assistant superintendent, whatever the structure is there, and say, look, how can we start creating some communities, because we're getting some interesting results, of which then we should be getting into a generative conversation around this, so that over time we can begin to see how this can be implemented as the normal procedure of how we're working with these kids. It's how you phrase the question. It's how you do that. That's why if you look at that, all of you, if you look at that professional learning as continuous, what's the next bullet down? So the concept of time's got to be changed. You got to think about that. How do we do that? And then the other question is you know, how do we take control of professional development? Do we look for the type of research to get people to read this? Do we do searches out there to find out how many people are beginning to explore the concepts that we're looking at? And now, here's where technology comes into play. We're using Zoom. Maybe we can contact some other schools that are doing this, and let's set up some Zooms where we get into general conversations about how we can begin to implement this and change our behavior and the structures over time. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
Yes.
See, you know, that's what I'm talking about. And again, one of the purposes of this program that you're in is to give you the skill sets, or to begin to get you to think about how I can, first of all, as an individual, in terms of myself, make change, but more importantly then, from a leadership point of view, how can I generate the type of change processes that will make our system better? Because there's a lot of complexity out there, and you all know that. You're hit with it constantly, whether it be mandates coming down, you know, from state departments. But those of you who are not in the school environment, you're being hit with the same types of things. So, you know, our colleague who works for Johnson & Johnson, you know, what goes on there when new ideas have to be promoted, or et cetera? Do they change the types of structures that allow professional learning to become a continuous process? See, those are the types of questions that you need to begin in terms of yourself to think about. And that's why, again, remember what's so nice about the iceberg. If you get stuck in the day-to-day routines at the event level, you're going to drown. You're not going to be able to move forward. That is the most important thing. So I asked you, I said to you, okay, what do you see in these kids? And you're telling me, man, it's really cool. We're getting data that says that this approach with this group of Hispanic kids, because of the nature of their culture, seems to be working. So we have some data. Now you've gone into patterns and trends. Next question is, all right, what do we have presently within our structure that's blocking us from doing this right now? And why is it there? What can we do, or how do we have to restructure in order to allow these concepts to make a shift in our thinking about the learning teaching process? See, that, you know, for me, and I'm going to use myself as an example, for me, this is pretty easy because I think this way. Because, you know, I've studied it, I've looked at it as a superintendent, I did things like this. So what I'm telling you, all of you, is that what becomes important for you is to look at this stuff and see how it integrates into what you're doing. And then you begin to play with it and explore it and experiment with it. Sometimes you're going to have success, other times you're not. I've had a lot of failures. But then again, I look at the failure and say, okay, what happened? What did I contribute to the failure, or what was structurally involved that caused this not to work? So I hope, you know, as you think about this, that makes some sense to you as you look at these ideas. You know, and I'm drawing from my own experience of working both in, you know, the K-12 environment and also in the university environment. Quite frankly, and I'll say it and I'm recording this, the university environment is even harder to change because of, you know, our mental models. Because many times we're lone wolves in the university environment, and it's really highly structured. Nice thing I noticed in relationship to Drexel as part of its strategic planning is that the president is trying to really push interdisciplinary learning across the board. So again, in K-12, how do you push interdisciplinary learning? And again, when you look at these bullets, every one of these bullets have to be entertained and looked at. So this is help. Again, give me some feedback if this makes sense or doesn't, or you want to argue about it, or where you see issues there. This, I think, is a critical component, particularly as you think about change process and trying to come up with new prototypes on how you're going to do schooling in your, quote, real environment. So let me stop talking and see if there's any thoughts about that. So maybe a way of beginning to think about this again is remember this concept and this.
Dr. Gould,
Yes, please.
going back to the other one, you said different forms of assessment.
Yeah.
I think a key to moving on there would probably be to get rid of standardized testing as we now have it.
Yeah.
Because I think it just traps everybody
Yep.
into, one way of doing things.
Yep. Yep.
And it just stymies everything you have listed there.
Yeah. But you do see some movement towards an understanding that the assessment processes need to be looked at even at the state level. That the problem though is what I see personally is that we're
Overweighted.
and we're making changes in the design of it, but the problem is we're putting the cart before the horse. If you guys remember Deming, who was a major thinker in terms of changing organizations. Deming went to Japan after World War II and basically was one of the major individuals to get Japan to rethink and restructure itself. The reason I'm bringing up Deming always said that you never put assessment in at the beginning of any change process. You always wait 5 or 6 years before you assess it because of the complexity of shifting behaviors that are necessary to learn the new process. The problem is, and Richard, that why we're locked into the standardization approaches is that we're all products of that old system. And that's what legislators know. That's what parents know. That's what you know, because you have come through this type of system. Unless you were educated in Montessori or a Steiner school or something different, or you were homeschooled, it's not as strong of a mental model. So one of the problems, and I've talked to legislators about this, is, and what's so funny about it is they all agree, but they revert back to, well, the only way the taxpayer is going to know that they're getting anything for their return on investment is that test scores are given, static test scores. So there is movement away from that, and what I'm hoping is this movement towards STEM or STEAM, either one of those, and this emergence of the integration of maker spaces or these types of labs might begin to develop that shift away from the assessment component so that we come up with new ones. But again, what I'm going to say to you guys right now, and I'm going to put the challenge out to you, I don't care where you are in the system, you have to have the responsibility to begin to talk to people about this and write your legislators about it. Talk to your local people about this, because you need to get them to begin to understand that the schools are not the same as when they went to school. The problem is they have the power to pass this. And unless you get parents and you get business people to get into the dialogue around this, yeah, you're right. That bullet there is going to stop us from moving forward. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, I'm laying it out on you guys to, quite frankly, to begin to make the arguments and the way you do it is you do it in your small groups, and then you begin to look at how you can begin to talk and become political. And what I mean by that is talk to your legislators, because they control what goes on. Give them examples. Bring your legislators into that classroom to watch these kids working in community. And then argue the case that one of the problems that we're in with is that our assessment techniques right now stop this from taking place. It's not that we don't need assessment. The word there is new forms of assessment. So portfolio development, creating a portfolio of kids' work over time, and it becomes individualized, and it can have an individualized component to it, and it can have a group component to it. So those are the types of things. Even universities are talking more and more about getting rid of the type of entrance components that they use. And again, universities are going to be under a lot of serious problems just because of the fact of the matter is more and more people are saying, I'm not going to college. I might go to community college, which makes more sense because I just cannot afford the amount of money that you have to shell out for a degree. Even though the learning you get there is important to you, it becomes an economic issue.
Dr. Gould?
Yes.
Hi, this is Karen from Philadelphia, Cohort 7.
Yeah.
The college I work for and I teach at, we just went through our Middle States reaccreditation, and I was a core team member. And the one thing that was presented to us and going through at that time, I know they've changed the standards, but the 14 standards was assessment, and it had to be in the forefront.
Right.
I understand what you're saying in regards to waiting to do assessment, but from Middle States, it was like if you don't have assessment component ingrained right from the beginning, you're not going to pass on that standard.
Yeah, we're going through that at Drexel right now. And I'm going to be in charge of the educational administrative side of this going forward. And that's going to be, I'm in for an interesting debate with those people on that one.
Yeah, because I mean, assessment has to be in the forefront,
Yeah.
Closing the loop. You've got to show that this is, credible in what you're doing, how you're doing it. Show me how this is making a difference.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, because what it's saying is, okay, what are the assessment structures you're going to use? Because what's happening is the same thing that's happening in K-12 is now happening at universities. Because what the federal government basically is saying, and it's because of student debt, et cetera, you got to show how in the world the return on investment is going to work for you. And that's why assessment is important. I'm not saying assessment isn't needed. What I'm saying is we need different forms of assessment given what our needs for the future are. So if we're saying that we need team building types of kids that can work in teams, we need entrepreneurial kids, we need kids that can think on their feet, we need human beings that can function in very chaotic or ambiguous environments in order to produce something. Well, you can't use standardized forms of assessment to do that. But you do need assessment to say, yes, these kids are certified in a way that they have demonstrated their ability to interact with those types of things that we're trying to prepare them for. So yeah, you're right. I don't see any problem with the concept of assessment. And again, what that bullet says is new forms. We can't use the old model of assessment. I mean, you learn that in systems thinking. Feedback loops are extremely important.
And the other point about assessment, not only assessment in programs, but in student learning outcomes, but also institutional assessment.
Right. It's all that. So how are you doing? And again, all of that. What is literally driving? I can't find my cell phone, but it'll just play out. So what is driving this need for assessment?
Again, return on investment.
Yeah, that's it. It's economic.
And that's a part of your marketing of your organization moving forward.
Yep. It's totally on assessment in relationship to return on investment, because when you look at student debt right now, that's the political aspect of it. And therefore, what they're saying is that you better be able to demonstrate through assessment that both the function of the university is there structurally, and that individual learning is there. So there's no argument with that. That's a given. The problem is the form of assessment. Okay?
I do think this is Amanda, with the university, there is also this piece of faculty outside of a graduate school of education, for the most part, have never been taught to teach.
Right.
And so somehow, right, not just return on investment, but there's got to be some check that they're actually teaching, because if they're just giving grades and they're here to do research, right? So I don't know that assessment, the way that accreditation works, is the best way to do that. But
yeah,
spoken with students here at Penn their teachers are horrible, their professors, because they're not here to be professors. They're here to be researchers, but they have to do the teaching. And they have tenure, so they're never leaving. So, there's got to be some check on that. I think that doesn't happen so much in graduate schools of education, because so many people there were teachers. But
again, that goes to that bullet: professional learning is continuous. And the problem is like you said, so those who are in K-12, you basically don't deal with this type of environment. But what happens at the university level is, and why the research, so you look at Drexel, you look at Penn, they're tier 1 research universities. So where's most of their money come from? Grants, research endowments, things of that nature. So again, you're right. There's always that battle between, teaching and doing research. That's the conundrum at the university level. At the K-12 level, where it comes in there is the ability, I think, for the professional learning to allow for changes, or to be much more flexible in the ability to change the structure for kids as we are moving forward into a world that is so different than what most teachers grew up in. So that's the problem facing there. How do you begin to do that? So again, let me go to this one. As we said, and we talked about this before, is that, so as you think of your prototypes, and then you think about the current reality, is that the thing I want you to be aware of is that tension between the two. And that tension is where creativity comes out of. And so the more you understand the innovative, the design thinking process, the more you can think about as a leader, and I don't care where you are in the organizational structure, as a leader, you're understanding that vision, which is designed to answer the question where we want to be in the future, what's our shared sense of purpose, versus what our current reality is. That tension is where you're playing. That's where your leadership has to be. And again, as I said to you, if you allow the current reality to be very strong and you keep saying, yes, but, we'll use that terminology, what that does then is draw that upper hand down, as opposed to saying, yes, and we can try this. Then what the tendency is that the upper hand has more power behind it, which then can pull the current reality closer to the vision, knowing that they never meet. That's the important thing to understand. They never meet because you're dealing with the complexity of human beings in relationships that emerge out of that. So your understanding of that flow between divergent and convergent thinking, and that's what's so good about that Puccio book, is that it gets you to think about that relationship between current reality and vision. Okay? That to me, I think is what's very critical for you as you think about the concept of creativity and innovation as it ties into this overall concept of leadership. But this slide's important for you to think about. This comes out of, and I believe he has it in The Necessary Revolution, and obviously if you have the copy of The Schools That Learn is there, and Russell Ackoff talks about this also in Learning Right Side Up. So again, these relationships, the more they're conscious in your own awareness as a human being working in an educational institution, the more you will be able to deal with the complexity of the change process. And I'm going to tell you that right now, from the years of experience that I've had, both from failure and success, this model will help you to think quite a bit about dealing with the daily complexities that you all interact with. Okay? So let me show you Gould's example. And again, this is stuff that I used in the classroom. So and I keep telling you is that metaphors are very important. And so the metaphor, as you think about your own prototype that you're working with, and this is what I used to it, with our teachers. I just basically said, if we're going to move from factory model, again, I use the metaphor that schools are seed beds. And that if we think of a school as a garden and the kids as seeds, then how does that begin to change our thinking about how we organize the flow of information? So when you look at this, I basically, work from this idea of tools of expression to, enhancing thinking through core knowledge, moving into a problem-solving interdisciplinary approach, and then product-based. Actually, I've changed that not from project-oriented to, I changed it to product-oriented based upon some of the work coming out of Young Zhao. So this gives you a conceptual framework. So, okay, good, I got a conceptual framework. What does that mean in relationship to, the putting it into action? So the assumptions I began to think about is that one of the assumptions I was getting our staff to begin to think about is that our job's not just there to get content acquisition. What it is, and this is where the teaching comes in, this is changing the learning environment, is that thinking, communicating, and learning are the approaches, and structurally we're looking at interdisciplinary and multi-age grouping of kids. So as you look at that, thinking again is creating, analyzing the assumptions and the stuff that we carry around our heads. Get kids to look at that. So from a teaching point of view, one of the teaching models that you use with kids is concept attainment and concept formation. That these are teaching methodologies that are kind of interesting, and a simple way of thinking about it is 20 questions. Tell me about something. Here's a problem, and I will answer your questions either with a yes or no. And so that's concept attainment. These are techniques that you can learn how to utilize, particularly if you're a K-12 teacher. And the person who I strongly recommend you to get a hold of, his work, is a guy by the name of Bruce Joyce and Beverly Showers, who wrote a book that is in the 7th or 8th printing called Models of Teaching. Really interesting stuff, really good stuff to use. So that thinking concept is there. Learning then, as I got defined, is the ability to construct new assumptions. You want kids to be able to create assumptions about their learning, about their ideas. What does the introduction of thinking about chemistry or thinking about geology or thinking about art or music, what does that do to their thinking? How does it shift their thinking? Do we ask those types of questions? And I'll tell you, if you start that at a very early age, by the time they get into college or university, you're going to have a different type of kid coming in. You really will. And then communicating, presenting our thinking to allow others to develop understanding. Think about theory U. What's that all about? I'm trying to understand why you think that way. I want to get into your shoes so I can walk in your shoes to understand where you're coming from. So these became the components that we started to look at. Now, I'm not going to give you the entire structure, but so for example, the way in which you organize the curriculum, so we group kids 5 to 8 years of age, and we really begin to focus on getting kids to communicate through different forms of expression. Because in this day and age, again, and when I was designing this and using this, this is in the late 90s and the early 2000s, just when the technology was starting to emerge. So the information base that you give kids at this time is systems of expression. And I'll show you that in a second. Language, written numerical, visual notation, art, music, dance, and inquiry. And so the structure is around your day would be structured around thematic activities. The themes help kids understand how they are part of a community. So again, think about your sense of creating community from a cultural point of view, dealing with Hispanic kids. Now, what was interesting about this is because of this multimedia world, we started talking about literacy as being something different. So again, this is traditionally what we do. You got ABCs, you got letters that create words, that create sentences. Then you have 1, 2, 3, which then moves into operations, which then creates formulas. So if you think about it, a formula in mathematics is no different than a sentence in our linguistic side of the thing. So think about that if you started getting kids to look at that. Now, let's say it's something else to that, is that colors, primaries create shape, then move into design. So how does someone express their ideas non-linguistically through the use of color? How does that do that? And then finally, we'd add in musical notation, which gets chords to phrases. So begin to look at that. Sentences, formulas, design, phrases in relationship to that. And I did have one, and I don't know if I added it on the slide. I also had physical movement, bodily movement through dance, etc. Now, that's what you get kids to work on. You get them to begin to look at the interrelationship, because later on, if you think about when they get in the 7th, 8th, 9th grade, you begin to expose them to algebraic expressions, chemical expressions through equations, and sentence structure. And I don't know if any of you, if you still do this, or you did it when you went to school, sentence diagramming. So if you think about a chemical equation or formula, you think about a algebraic equation, and you think about a sentence using sentence diagramming, what do you have? It's all language. Now think about if you got kids to start thinking this way. It's a different way, because the neurosciences are showing how the brain then functions around, the use of linguistic and non-linguistic uses of both memory development, because memory is extremely important, that we have to develop memory. And you need to remember that all long-term memory is stored non-linguistically. So again, look at that structure. and that this then really gets kids to begin to get insight into their own thinking, of which we call metacognition. And then finally, I'm just going to jump up to, to the last one. That what would happen is high school would end at 16. And then we create new structures from 16 to adult. So now if you got the kids working at 5 to 8 years of age in that structure, and I have 2 other structures in between, what would happen is that by the time the kid is 16 years of age, they should be able to have a pretty good sense on, what they like to do. At least they begin to look at this. And then again, if you notice science and tech and math and history, social sciences, all of these things, systems thinking, humanities are the information base that these kids are working in, whether they want to be a doctor or they want to be a scientist or they want to be mathematically literate. Then what happens is kids organize around product-based learning, and that these activities allow them to create portfolios that demonstrate their application of the numerics, the literature, whatever we would have. So what I'm showing you is a way to reorganize around the concept of what a day would look like, what teachers would be doing, what kids would be doing. And then finally, what more importantly though, is the metaphor is that underlies this whole thing is that a school's a seed bed and our job is to nurture every seed. Okay? So I just wanted to show you that to kind of give you a sense of what innovative or creative thinking and putting these things together and how you can begin to do it both in your own environment and obviously why I have you creating these prototypes of possible learning spaces for the future. So I'm going to stop talking and see if you got questions or comments or whatever, or want to talk about your assignment or anything of that nature. And these slides will be available to you. So thoughts, comments?
Okay, hey everyone. I had one thought. This is going back to what Carrie had shared earlier with the group as far as, how, trying to kind of assess a new concept or, introduce things. And I currently work for a nonprofit, and we partnered with another nonprofit called Read Charlotte. And their goal is to increase the literacy level for students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools or CMS schools. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the Charlotte demographics down here, more than half the population is, more than half the population is non-white. So Black, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, with the Latino population being the largest. So of course, because they are the largest, they skew most of the the literacy trends right now.
Right.
And what, was interesting in their approach in trying to reach this community, they defaulted to what they've always done. It's like, okay, we'll start in the school, use these regular assessments. And that approach didn't work, and what was happening is we found that we really had to involve the parents or the community, and the community where the conversation was taking place was not in a traditional classroom. It's not in a PTA meeting. It was actually on Facebook.
Yeah. Right.
So most of the parents of, these school age children within the Latino Hispanic community, they're relying on their children to come back and, share with them what's going on in school. They work crazy, or varying hours. So they don't, they can't accommodate, a PTA meeting or anything. So where they get their information from is on Facebook. Yeah. And once we realized that it was like, okay, well, how many other organizations do we know that communicate with this particular population on Facebook, and who else can we invite into the conversation to kind of learn. So once we realized that that's what was going on, all, judgment was suspended on what the best practices were and all that, because this totally went against the norm. So Carrie, I have to say, I really appreciate you for bringing up that example earlier, because that's something that, I'm experiencing down here and working with different communities and seeing that, this instance happened with Reach Charlotte. As a marketing person for a nonprofit, I changed our communications when reaching out to that particular population. And it resulted in, several other media placements and, it's increased our brand awareness in that community. But I think it's, we really have to take a step back and say, okay, well, this is uncharted territory and it's okay to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. So you found a partner now in this cohort that you could probably do some interesting discussion about, given what she's been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm excited about that. Thank you, Carrie. If she's still around.
I'm still here. I was trying to unmute quick. No, you know what? We actually use Facebook too, especially because it has the ability to translate quickly.
Yep.
It's one of the greatest tools that we found, because there's really no other way to get. And the other thing is that I don't know if you're finding this with your community, but cell phone numbers tend to change quickly, so you don't really have contact. You don't have solid contact information, but they keep their Facebook.
Yep.
So that's how we get in contact with a lot of our parents now.
Yeah, and this is a great example for all of you. Look how this okay. You're down where, North Carolina, and so look at the possibility of a new pattern of relationship, and maybe even getting some of your kids to connect with her kids and parents connect, etc. You can use Facebook. The other thing is then begin to explore the fact of the matter, you can't do PTAs and all that stuff. But again, look at the vehicle of using Zoom or any of these things where you can create these floating times where people can meet face-to-face virtually. Mm-hmm. These are the types of things. As long as you can keep opening communication levels. That's the one thing, if you remember what Sankey talks about, is he said he was very, he doesn't like the word systems thinking because it became this buzzword. But what he said is it's all about relationships and patterns of relationships. All of this is that. And so as you think about your prototype and putting that together, really what you're trying to do is create new patterns of relationships, among people. That's it, pure and simple. It is rather simple in the structure. The complexity is that you're dealing with multiple perceptions of reality. That's what it is. And I'm not talking about alternative facts. I'm talking about different perceptions of how I perceive the world. That's all you're doing. And that dialogue is what becomes very important. Yeah, good. I'm glad you guys, are connecting that way. So other questions, comments, thoughts?
Dr. Gould, I was thinking about what Richard was saying with the assessments. And, I was thinking at least in Pennsylvania, we're moving towards the place where they keep pushing back Keystones as being the standard for graduation. Right. Mostly because they can't figure out what to do with the kids that can't pass the Keystones. And then, that's the running problem. And so they're relying on us to come up with some kind of project-based alternative to prove proficiency in our students that can't pass the Keystones. And I'm struggling to understand, why can't we just use that project-based alternative as our assessment?
Well, you can create, start working on portfolios. But what's interesting about the portfolio, have it juried by people outside the school who are experts in a particular field.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's think about it. You know, if you go to art school, you know, generally, what do you bring to get in?
I don't know. We didn't go to art school.
Well, you know, well, think about it. So if I'm going to go to art school and it's a famous art school, what am I going to bring to show what I can do?
Your portfolio.
Yeah, you know, and that's what we're talking about here. And if they're giving you the opportunity to come up with something different, then okay, what if we have a juried portfolio and the teacher doesn't rate it, but you got people in the community who have expertise around something, whatever it might be, the application, mathematics, I don't care what it is, and that they certify that, yes, this kid can demonstrate an understanding. I would throw that by them. Because what would happen is if they said yes, and it would allow you to do that, or you got some type of grant to do that, what would be interesting about that is, I'll guarantee you over time, that might become the major format for all kids. Because we all talk about differentiated instruction. We all talk about differentiated learning. Well, then why don't we have differentiated assessment? And those are the types of questions we got to start, you know, posing to, you know, to power structure, and I'm going to use it that word, to the power structure who puts together the you know, the standards that have the rule of law. So, okay, let's get a dialogue with the people who do that. Because again, they are products of a system that has to change. Just does. So that's what I'm telling you. And I think you as leaders who are going through a doctoral program that is focused on leadership and change and how to manage organizations, then, you know, okay, this is how you got to start doing it. I mean, it's your responsibility to do it. I've been out there doing it for, you know, 48 years. And I'm at the point that, okay, I got to convince you guys to do it now, because I'm not going to be doing it much longer. Well, hopefully I'll be breathing longer. But I'm just saying, if, you know, from that point of view, you get to a point where, okay, you know, someone else has got to pick up the baton and move it forward. It's a relay race. And you guys aren't going to see the end product of this, but you have to be the transitional people to move that next generation. That's what it's all about. So with that, what are you guys thinking? You got enough? Any questions? You know what you got to do with your projects. I'll give you a little bit more information what's going to happen the last week. We're not doing show and tell the last week. Your teams will send me their projects and I will look at those projects. I can share them, but we're not going to have a Zoom where everyone's going to present it. I'll make it available for people and other teams to look at. We're going to do an assessment at the end of week 10. So I have a whole series of things I'm going to take you through. So we will do assessment of what's going on in this course and what's happening with you as a learner, etc. Okay? So that's all I got to say. I couldn't get a word in edgewise because you guys just wouldn't stop talking. I find it so interesting in working in virtual environments to get people to interact. So otherwise, that's it. Again, you know, if you've got any questions or you got thoughts about this, this will be, you know, posted up. I will have the slides available if you want to take a look at them. And if you want to have a conversation about that curriculum design, you know, you want to talk to me about it, let me know. Okay? So since there seems to be no more discussion, I'm going to turn off the